The massive halls of the Galactic Council buzzed with whispers and murmurs. Thousands of beings from across the universe gathered to witness yet another species attempt the impossible. In the center of the grand chamber stood the artifact, a floating, geometric structure that had puzzled the greatest minds for over 50,000 years. "Another failure approaches," muttered one of the senior council members, their crystalline form glinting under the chamber's soft light. They had seen this scene play out hundreds of times before. Every few decades, a new species would rise to the challenge, confident they would succeed where others had failed. Each time, they left defeated. The artifact hung silently in its containment field, its dark metallic surface covered in shifting patterns that seemed to move like liquid. No one knew who created it or why, but its discovery had shaped galactic civilization. The message it carried was clear: solve the puzzle, prove your worth, and unlock the secrets of the universe. Today was different, though. Today, the newest species to join the galactic community would attempt the test. Humans. "They've barely mastered faster-than-light travel," scoffed another council member, their tentacles waving dismissively. "What makes them think they can solve what the brightest minds of the galaxy couldn't?" The human delegation entered the chamber. They were small compared to most species present, but they walked with a quiet confidence that caught many observers off guard. Leading them was Professor James Miller, his gray hair and weathered face marking him as one of the older members of his species. "Welcome, representatives of Earth," announced the council head, their voice echoing through the chamber. "You understand why you are here?" Miller nodded, his eyes fixed on the artifact. "We do. We've studied the records of previous attempts. Then you know that species far more advanced than yours have tried and failed. The bright ones of Centauri, with their quantum consciousness, failed. The mathematical order of Vega, who think in pure equations, failed. Even the Silicon Collective, with their planet-sized computing networks, failed." Miller simply smiled. "We know." The council head continued. "The test has 3 phases. No species has ever completed even the first. You have 1 standard rotation to attempt it. Are you prepared to begin?" The human team moved forward. Besides Miller, there was Kate, who studied ancient civilizations, Mike, who worked with advanced computers, and Tom, who understood patterns in language better than anyone else on Earth. "We're ready," Miller said. The chamber darkened. The artifact began to glow, its patterns moving faster. Holographic displays appeared around it, showing symbols and equations that seemed to shift and change every few seconds. The human team spread out around the artifact, each taking a different position. They had trained for this moment for months, studying every failed attempt, every theory, every piece of data they could find. "Beginning Phase 1, announced the council head. The artifact pulsed with light. Most species would immediately start trying to solve the mathematical equations floating around it. The humans didn't. Instead, they watched. They waited. They observed how the patterns changed and flowed. Minutes passed, then hours. The council members grew restless. "Another waste of time," someone muttered. But then Miller did something unexpected. He reached out and touched the containment field, something no other species had done before. The field was meant to protect the artifact, not interact with it. The chamber erupted in gasps and shouts of protest. But before anyone could stop him, something extraordinary happened. The artifact's patterns changed. New symbols appeared, different from anything seen before. Miller turned to the council, his face serious. "Your records show thousands of failed attempts, but did anyone ever ask why the artifact was left here? What its true purpose might be?" The chamber fell silent. "We think," Miller continued, "everyone's been trying to solve the wrong puzzle. This isn't just a test of intelligence or technological advancement. It's something else entirely." The artifact pulsed again, brighter this time. The first phase wasn't ending in failure as it always had before. Instead, it was just beginning. The Galactic Council leaned forward in their seats, For the first time in 50,000 years, something new was happening, and the humans were just getting started. The council chamber remained in stunned silence as the humans continued their work. The artifact's glow had changed from its usual cold blue to a warm amber color, something no other species had ever triggered before. "Impossible," whispered a council elder, their 6 eyes widening in disbelief. Kate moved around the artifact, studying its changing patterns closely. Unlike the logical approach used by other species, she treated it like an ancient relic with cultural significance. "These patterns," she said quietly to Miller, "they're not just mathematical. They're telling a story." Mike nodded, his fingers moving through the holographic displays. "It's responding to us differently. Look at the data stream. It's adapting to our interactions." The council members exchanged worried glances. This was unprecedented. A tall, spider-like alien stepped forward, his metal armor marking him as Admiral Bolt of the Rigel Confederation. "This makes no sense. Your species is primitive compared to ours. We attempted the test 50 times with our best minds." Tom looked up from his notes. "Maybe that's the problem. You kept using the same approach." "Explain," demanded Bolt. Miller gestured to the artifact. "Everyone assumed this was a test of pure intelligence, mathematical puzzles, and logical challenges. But look at how it responds when we approach it differently." To demonstrate, Kate placed her hand near one of the shifting symbols and closed her eyes. She wasn't calculating or analyzing. She was feeling. The symbol brightened and expanded, revealing new layers of complexity. "Fascinating," Tom said, quickly recording the changes. "It's responsive to emotional input." The council chamber erupted into confused chatter. Emotions were considered irrelevant by most advanced species. Many had evolved beyond them or suppressed them as primitive distractions. "Ridiculous," scoffed Admiral Bolt. "Emotions are inefficient evolutionary leftovers." Miller smiled. "Maybe for your species, but for humans, they're essential to how we understand the world." Mike had connected a small device to the holographic interface. "I'm running an analysis that includes emotional response patterns alongside logical solutions." The artifact pulsed brightly, and suddenly the first layer of symbols aligned perfectly, revealing a deeper layer beneath. The humans had just accomplished more in 3 hours than any species had in thousands of years. A hushed awe fell over the chamber. "They've completed Phase 1, announced the council head, their voice barely concealing their shock. Kate turned to her teammates. "It's not just testing our ability to solve problems. It's testing our approach to solving them." Tom nodded excitedly. "The symbols are changing in response to our curiosity and wonder, not just our logical reasoning." As the team worked, the council members began discussing among themselves, some with growing concern. "If they solve this," began one member, "it would shift the balance of power completely," finished another. Admiral Bolt watched with narrowed eyes. "This must be some trick. Humans are too young, too emotional, too unpredictable to succeed where we failed." Meanwhile, Miller had noticed something else. "Look at the historical records of previous attempts. Every species approached this as a competition, a way to prove their superiority. But we're approaching it as a discovery," Kate added. "Something to understand, not conquer." The artifact's patterns shifted again, opening a pathway to Phase 2. No species in recorded history had ever seen this level of the test. Mike whistled softly. "This is incredible. The complexity is increasing exponentially." New holographic displays appeared, showing what looked like star maps, molecular structures, and energy patterns all intertwined in ways that defied conventional physics. Miller turned to the council. "We're going to need more time." The council had hesitated, then nodded. "The standard protocols allow for extended testing if Phase 1 is completed. You may continue." As the human team dived into Phase 2, whispers spread throughout the chamber. Some were impressed, others concerned, but all were amazed. Admiral Bolt turned to leave, his metallic legs clicking against the floor. "Inform me immediately of any developments," He ordered his aides. I need to contact our high command. Something unprecedented was happening in the galaxy, and nobody was quite sure what it meant. News of the humans' progress spread quickly through the galaxy. By the second day, the observation platforms around the council chamber were packed with representatives from hundreds of worlds, all eager to witness what many considered impossible. Inside the chamber, the human team worked tirelessly. They had set up a small camp around the artifact, taking shifts to study it continuously. The floating object now pulsed with colors never seen before, deep purples, fiery oranges, and flashes of gold that seemed to respond directly to their presence. They haven't slept in 30 hours, remarked a council member to their colleague. Their persistence is unusual, replied the other. Miller sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes closed, while the artifact projected complex energy patterns above him. Unlike the rigid, structured approach of other species, he simply allowed his mind to wander, following intuitive connections rather than logical pathways. Kate approached him with a cup of water. You should rest, James. He opened his eyes and accepted the drink gratefully. I think I understand why others failed, he said quietly. They tried to force solutions using only their intellect. Mike looked up from his workstation. They separated thinking from feeling. But this artifact, he gestured to the swirling patterns, it responds to both together. A group of scientists from the Andromeda Alliance had been permitted to observe more closely. Their leader, Dr. Elm, a tall being with translucent skin revealing complex neural pathways beneath, approached the humans. Your methods defy all established protocols, Elm stated. Yet you've made more progress in 2 days than my people made in 2 centuries. Tom smiled up from his notes. Sometimes breaking convention is necessary for breakthrough. Elm tilted their head curiously. Explain your approach. Miller stood, stretching his tired muscles. Most species evolved to separate logic from emotion, seeing feelings as distractions. We humans never made that division so complete. We think with our hearts as much as our minds. That sounds inefficient, Elm remarked. Maybe, Kate joined in. But it gives us perspectives others miss. The artifact wasn't designed to be solved by pure logic. It was designed to be understood. As they spoke, the artifact suddenly shifted, its patterns aligning in a new configuration. Phase 2 was progressing rapidly. Look, Mike called out excitedly. These energy signatures, they're matching human brainwave patterns. The team gathered around his display. The artifact was synchronizing with their neural activity, creating a feedback loop that strengthened with each interaction. It's learning from us as we learn from it, Tom realized. A two-way communication. News of this development caused a stir throughout the chamber. Some council members appeared concerned. If the artifact is truly communicating, one argued, then it may be imparting knowledge meant to be earned, not given. Another countered, or perhaps it was waiting for a species that could truly understand its message. As debates raged, Admiral Bolt returned with a delegation of military officials from several powerful alliances. They watched the humans with calculating eyes. This could upset millennia of established hierarchy, Bolt muttered to his companions. If humans solve this. Meanwhile, Miller had made another discovery. He called his team together, speaking quietly so others couldn't hear. The artifact isn't just a test, he explained. It's a key. These patterns we're seeing, they're unlocking something deeper. Kate nodded. I've been studying the historical archives. The precursor species who left this, they weren't trying to find the smartest civilization. They were looking for something else. Balance, Tom said suddenly. They wanted a species that balances technology with understanding, logic with intuition. The artifact pulsed brightly as if responding to his words, and suddenly the second phase was complete. A new layer emerged, revealing complex structures that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Phase 3 had begun, something no species had ever witnessed before. The chamber fell silent as everyone stared in amazement. Even Admiral Bolt and his delegation seemed momentarily stunned. Miller looked at his team, their faces illuminated by the artifact's glow. "We're close to something profound," he said quietly, "but I think the real challenge is still ahead." The humans had broken through barriers that had stood for thousands of years, but the true test was just beginning. As Phase 3 began, the artifact transformed completely. It no longer resembled the geometric structure first presented to the humans. Now it hovered as a complex, multilayered sphere of light and energy, pulsing with what almost seemed like a heartbeat. The council chamber had been expanded to accommodate the growing number of observers. Representatives from every corner of the galaxy watched with a mixture of awe and concern as the human team entered their third day of testing. Miller stood before the transformed artifact, his tired eyes reflecting its glow. "There's something we're still missing," he said to his team. "We've been treating this as a puzzle to solve, but I think that's still the wrong approach." Kate nodded, rubbing her exhausted eyes. "The patterns suggest communication, not examination." Tom had been unusually quiet for the past few hours, staring intently at the swirling lights. "It's not asking us what we know," he said suddenly. "It's asking us why we want to know it." The team fell silent, contemplating his words. Mike approached with new readings. "The energy signatures have changed again. They're matching our brainwaves, but also our heart rates, our breathing patterns, everything. It's not testing our intelligence," Miller realized. "It's testing our intentions." This revelation sent a ripple through the team. They gathered in a tight circle, speaking in hushed tones, while the gallery of alien observers watched curiously. "What if," Kate suggested, "we stop trying to decode it, and instead try to understand why it exists in the first place?" Miller's eyes widened. The precursors weren't looking for someone to solve their puzzle. They were looking for someone who would ask why they created it. With this new perspective, the team approached the artifact differently. Instead of analyzing its patterns, they began to contemplate its purpose. Miller stepped forward and addressed it directly. "We don't seek your knowledge for power," he said clearly. "We seek understanding." The artifact's light pulsed brighter. Kate joined him. "We want to learn not just what you know, but why you believe it matters." The pulsing intensified. Tom and Mike stepped forward together. "We offer connection, not conquest," Tom added. The chamber filled with gasps as the artifact began to unfold like a blooming flower, revealing layers upon layers of complex information, not just scientific knowledge, but philosophical concepts, artistic expressions, and emotional insights, all interwoven. "It's beautiful," Kate whispered. Admiral Bolt pushed through the crowd, his face tight with concern. "What are you doing? This could be dangerous." Miller turned to him calmly. "It's not dangerous. It's a message, the most important message ever left for the galaxy." "What message?" demanded a council member. Miller gazed at the unfolding artifact. "That knowledge without wisdom is meaningless. Technology without empathy is empty." The precursors didn't just want to find the smartest species, they wanted to find one that would use knowledge responsibly. As he spoke, the artifact projected a series of images showing worlds destroyed by their own technologies, civilizations collapsed through conflict, and finally, beings evolving beyond physical form into something greater. The precursors, Kate realized, staring at the final images. They didn't die out or disappear. They transcended. Mike's instruments were recording everything. This information, it's beyond anything we've ever seen. Theories of reality that make our most advanced physics look primitive. The council head approached cautiously. "What does it want from us?" Miller watched as new patterns emerged from the artifact. "It wants us to understand that the universe isn't just matter and energy. It's purpose and meaning too. Science without conscience leads to destruction." Tom had been translating the emerging patterns. "There's more," he said excitedly. "It's showing us that the precursors are still present in some form, watching, waiting for a species worthy of joining them." A new holographic display appeared above the artifact, showing a map of the galaxy with certain points highlighted, hidden gateways to something beyond. The chamber erupted in excited and fearful chatter. Some species were already discussing how to secure these locations for themselves. Others argued about who should control this new knowledge. Miller watched these reactions with concern, understanding that the true test was still unfolding. The artifact hadn't just revealed information, it had created a challenge that would test the moral character of every species in the galaxy. And humanity now stood at the center of it all. The fourth day brought chaos to the Galactic Council. The human team's unprecedented progress had shattered the established order. Species that had considered themselves superior for millennia now faced the possibility that humans, barely spacefaring by galactic standards, might unlock secrets they had failed to grasp. Admiral Bolt called an emergency meeting of the Security Alliance, a coalition of the galaxy's most powerful military forces. Representatives from 12 dominant species gathered in a private chamber adjacent to the main hall. "This cannot be allowed to continue," Bolt declared, his metallic exoskeleton clicking as he paced. "If humans gain access to precursor technology, the balance of power will collapse overnight." General Vex of the Arcturus Dominion nodded. "They are too unpredictable, too emotional to be trusted with such knowledge." Meanwhile, in the main chamber, Miller and his team continued their work, unaware of the plotting against them. The artifact had entered a new phase, projecting what appeared to be blueprints for technologies beyond current galactic understanding. These energy conversion principles could solve resource scarcity across the galaxy, Mike said, his eyes wide with excitement. Kate was studying another projection. And these medical applications, they could extend lifespans, cure genetic diseases. Tom looked up from his notes with concern. "We're being watched more closely now, not just with curiosity." Miller had noticed it too. The changing atmosphere in the chamber, the whispered conversations, the calculating looks. "We need to be careful about how we proceed." His words proved prophetic. Within hours, a formal delegation approached, led by the Council Head and Admiral Bolt. "Humans," the Council Head began, "you have made remarkable progress, but the Council has concerns about security implications." Miller stood to meet them, his posture straight despite his exhaustion. "What concerns?" Admiral Bolt stepped forward. "The technologies revealed by the artifact could be dangerous in the wrong hands. The Council proposes that all findings be placed under galactic quarantine until proper assessment can be made." "By whom?" Miller asked. "A committee of the most advanced species," Bolt replied smoothly. "For the safety of all." Kate joined Miller, her eyes narrowing. "Including humans. Your representatives would be consulted," Bolt said, not meeting her gaze. Tom and Mike exchanged glances. They understood what was happening, an attempt to seize control of their discoveries. Miller responded carefully. "The artifact seems to have chosen humanity for a reason. I'm not sure it would respond the same way to others." As if hearing his words, the artifact pulsed, its light dimming noticeably. The Council had noticed. "See, your presence is disrupting its normal function." "No," Kate countered. "It's responding to your intentions. It can sense them." This claim sent murmurs through the gathering crowd. Admiral Bolt scoffed openly, but some younger species representatives moved closer, intrigued. "The precursors valued harmony and cooperation," Miller explained. "Their test wasn't designed to grant power to one species over others." "Pretty words," Bolt said dismissively. "Nevertheless, the Council has voted. Your testing period is suspended pending security review." A tense silence fell over the chamber. The human team faced a critical moment: resist and potentially cause a diplomatic incident, or stand down and lose everything they had worked for. Unexpectedly, help came from an unlikely source. A representative from the Proxima Collective, one of the younger spacefaring civilizations, stepped forward. "Point of order," they announced. "Council protocols state that a test cannot be terminated once Phase 3 has begun. To do so would violate the ancient agreements all member species have sworn to uphold." Other younger species joined in support, creating a division in the Council. The human team watched as the galactic community split before their eyes. Older, established powers opposing them, younger species supporting their right to continue. Earth's ambassador, who had been silent until now, stepped into the chamber. My government has been monitoring these proceedings. We recognize the concerns but will not surrender our right to complete the test. Admiral Bolt's eyes narrowed dangerously. This is not over. As tensions escalated, the artifact suddenly projected a new image, a countdown timer showing just 24 hours remaining. The final phase, Miller realized. It's forcing a resolution. The human team gathered around the artifact, knowing that the next day would determine not just their fate, but possibly the future of the entire galaxy. Behind them, the battle lines were being drawn. The countdown projected by the artifact created an atmosphere of urgent tension throughout the council chamber. With only hours remaining, both the human team and their opponents worked frantically to secure their positions. Miller had not slept in over 30 hours, but his eyes remained clear and focused. The team had gathered in a small circle around the artifact, which now floated as a complex, multi-dimensional structure that seemed to exist partially outside normal space. "We're missing something fundamental," Miller said quietly. "The precursors wouldn't create a test that simply rewards the winner with power." Kate nodded. "Everything we've learned suggests they valued cooperation over competition." Tom had been studying the newest projections from the artifact, complex symbols that shifted between mathematical equations and what appeared to be philosophical statements. "I think I understand," he said suddenly. "The final test isn't about solving the puzzle at all. It's about what we choose to do with the solution." The team fell silent, contemplating his words as the artifact pulsed with increasing brightness. Across the chamber, Admiral Bolt and the Security Alliance had gathered their forces. Several warships had moved into orbit around the Council planet, a not-so-subtle threat. "When the timer reaches 0, we move in and secure the artifact," Bolt instructed his officers. "The humans must not be allowed to complete the final phase." The Council was in disarray, divided between those who feared human success and those who were curious to see the test completed. The younger species had formed their own coalition, standing guard near the human team, offering protection. As the final hour approached, Miller made a decision. He called together not just his team, but representatives from every species present, including Admiral Bolt and his allies. "I'd like to share what we've discovered," Miller announced to the surprise gathering. Bolt narrowed his eyes suspiciously. "Why would you do that?" "Because that's the point," Miller replied simply. "The precursors didn't leave this test as a prize to be won. They left it as a lesson to be learned." With that, Miller began explaining their findings. He described how the artifact contained technologies that could end resource scarcity, extend lifespans, and allow travel between galaxies. But more importantly, he explained the philosophical underpinnings of these discoveries. "The precursors discovered that technological advancement without moral evolution leads to extinction," he explained. "They nearly destroyed themselves before learning this lesson." Kate continued, "They created this test not to find the most intelligent species, but to find one that could understand that power must be shared to be meaningful." As they spoke, the artifact's projections changed, confirming their words with images of civilizations rising and falling, of conflicts and cooperation, of evolution both technological and spiritual. Admiral Bolt listened with growing discomfort. "So you're suggesting we simply share these discoveries with everyone?" "Yes," Miller said firmly. "That's the final test. The precursors aren't looking for heirs to their power. They're looking for species that won't repeat their mistakes." The timer continued counting down as debate erupted throughout the chamber. Some species argued that sharing such advanced knowledge would bring chaos. Others insisted that restricting it would be worse. With just minutes remaining, Miller approached the artifact one last time. The entire chamber fell silent, watching. "We choose to share," he said simply, "not because we're perfect, but because we understand that no species can evolve alone. The universe is not a competition to be won, but a community to be built." As he spoke, Mike and Tom worked rapidly to transmit all their findings to the galactic network, making their discoveries available to every species simultaneously. The timer reached 0. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the artifact began to transform. It expanded outward, its light touching every corner of the chamber. Where it touched, understanding bloomed. Not just knowledge, but wisdom. Admiral Bolt stood frozen, the light washing over him. His rigid posture slowly relaxed as new understanding filled his mind. The artifact revealed its final secret. The precursors hadn't vanished. They had evolved beyond physical form, becoming guardians of a multidimensional reality that intersected with the known universe. And now, for the first time in 50,000 years, they had found a species worthy of making contact. Miller looked around at the transformed chamber, at beings from across the galaxy united in sudden understanding. The final test had never been about winning. It had been about transcending the very concept of victory. 1 month after the completion of the test, the Galactic Council chamber had been transformed. Where once rigid hierarchies and ancient rivalries dominated, now representatives from all species sat in a circular arrangement, symbolizing their new understanding of equality. Miller stood before them, no longer exhausted but energized by the changes sweeping across the galaxy. Beside him stood Admiral Bolt, once his opponent, now one of his strongest allies. The transition continues smoothly in the Arcturus sector, Bolt reported to the Assembly. The precursor technologies have allowed us to transform barren worlds into habitable ones without conflict over resources. The Council head nodded appreciatively. Similar reports come from all regions. The age of scarcity that defined our politics for millennia appears to be ending. Kate entered the chamber, accompanied by representatives from the younger species who had supported humanity during the crisis. They carried data crystals containing new discoveries. The precursor's knowledge continues to unfold, she announced. Each species seems to understand different aspects based on their unique perspectives. By sharing these insights, our collective understanding grows exponentially. This was perhaps the most surprising outcome of the test. Rather than one species gaining dominance through precursor technology, each civilization discovered they could only understand portions of the knowledge. Complete understanding required cooperation across biological, cultural, and philosophical differences. Tom approached with the latest communication findings. We've established preliminary contact with the precursors themselves, he reported, triggering excited murmurs throughout the chamber. They exist in dimensions adjacent to our own. They're pleased with the outcome of their test. What do they want from us? Asked a council member. Mike, who had been working on the communication technology, smiled. Not what you might expect. They don't want worship or obedience. They want conversation, an exchange of ideas. Miller stepped forward. The precursors evolved beyond physical form millions of years ago, but they discovered something unexpected in their transcendence. They found loneliness. A respectful silence fell over the chamber as Miller continued. They created the test not just to find worthy successors, but to find new perspectives, new ideas, new friends. The concept seemed strange, that beings of such advanced evolution would seek companionship from younger species. Yet it resonated with the core truth humanity had discovered. Consciousness, regardless of its form, sought connection. Earth's ambassador approached the central platform. The precursors have invited a delegation from all our species to visit their realm. They wish to begin formal relations with our united galactic community. What followed was something unprecedented, a spontaneous celebration that broke out across species that had once viewed each other with suspicion or contempt. Ancient enemies embraced. Traditional rivals shared knowledge. Biological differences became points of fascination rather than division. Miller found a quiet corner amid the celebration, watching with satisfaction. Kate joined him. "Did you ever imagine this outcome when we first arrived?" she asked. Miller shook his head. "I thought we might solve the puzzle, but I never expected it would solve us." Across the chamber, children from various species played together, their natural curiosity unburdened by the prejudices of their elders. They gathered around Tom, who was teaching them a human game adapted to include the abilities of each species. The precursors were right, Kate observed. Knowledge without wisdom is meaningless, and wisdom without compassion is empty, Miller added. The artifact, now permanently transformed into its revealed state, hovered at the center of the chamber. It served as both a reminder of the journey taken and a promise of journeys yet to come. Its light pulsed in harmony with the combined life signs of all beings present, a symbolic heartbeat of a united galaxy. As the celebration continued, Mike approached with news from Earth. They're calling it the Great Awakening back home. National borders are becoming less relevant as people realize we're part of something much larger. Miller nodded, unsurprised. The test had changed not just the galaxy, but every individual who understood its message. The day concluded with a ceremony formally establishing the new Galactic Union, a cooperative alliance replacing the old hierarchical council. Representatives from every species, from the most ancient to the newly spacefaring, placed their hands on the artifact together. As they did, its light enveloped them all equally, illuminating not just the chamber but the future, a future where no species stood alone. Humanity had passed the impossible test not by conquering it, but by understanding its true purpose, to bring the galaxy together.